people tend to know two things about meditation. One is it's good for stress. Sure, it is. As some of you know, I like to say, yeah, it's good for stress, but that's like eating ice cream to get calcium. I mean, ice cream has calcium, but that's not why we eat ice cream. And meditation's good for stress. But for me, meditation's about so much more than stress. And I know stress is a big problem and everybody's stressed, and meditation works. It's good. But there's so much more. Anyway, so there's that aspect. There's the stress aspect. And then there's this thing that people sort of think it's this weird Buddhist Hindu thing. It's like Eastern meditation, like people in pretzel shapes, like looking blissful, attaining nirvana. And I sort of avoid that part because I'm like, yeah, there is that part, but it's just good for real life. But nevertheless, week 11, I would sort of think it would be disingenuous not to talk at least a little bit about the fact that, sure, meditation does have a spiritual and religious background. It has been used by pretty much every single religious and spiritual tradition throughout history. There's a reason that it's used. So, week 11, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. What is it? The problem is, I don't really know what I'm talking about. And the thing is, I should. I have a degree in this subject. I have a degree in theology and religious studies. So I ought to know about this. But there's this funny thing. When you do theology and religious studies, you always get asked two questions immediately. At university, the first, I'd say to somebody, they'd say, oh, what are you studying? And I'd be like, oh, theology and religious studies. Guaranteed first question, are you going to be a priest? Now, nothing wrong with that question, but it gets kind of annoying when you get asked it 10,000 times, and the answer is no, I'm not going to be a priest. Second question they ask immediately is, so do you believe in God? And I understand I should be generous towards people for asking this question, but again, it's kind of thing like, ooh, theology guy, let's ask him, does he believe in God? Now, I understand that for most people, this seems like a relatively straightforward question. Do you believe in God? It's like one of those things. It's like, yes, no, maybe because I'm a very clever agnostic, whatever, something like that. The problem is that if you're studying theology and religious studies, very quickly you learn that's a non-trivial question. And the reason it's non-trivial is because it depends what you mean by God. It's like, do I think there's some bearded guy up in the sky like a daddy figure, like approving or disapproving of what I do, who's sitting waiting to see how many Green Bay Packers fans pray for a result versus how many Cowboys fans pray for a result. And then whoever, you give it to whoever one prays the most. Yeah, I probably don't believe in that God. And if you do, I'm just as likely to be wrong as you are. So then on the other side of it, the other extreme, if you like, of belief in God is a very sort of amorphous sense that maybe there's something. There's a line in Shakespeare somewhere. It sort of says, there is more in heaven and earth than thy philosophies. I think it's in Hamlet. And it's just this sense of like, okay, well, whatever we are very intellectually clever about, I think there's something more. Well, chances are most people would agree with that. There's something more. It's like science doesn't have all the answers. So there's a big range between, guy up in the sky with the beard, and then something. So when somebody says, do you believe in God? I never knew how to answer the question. And the truth is I still don't know how to answer the question. But tonight I'm going to try and offer some kind of like theoretical insight into why people meditated for religion. And that is, well, a little bit more background. So the other thing you study when you study theology and religious studies, the first thing they do is they try and weed out anybody who's a little bit flaky. So the first thing they do is they start you out with all of the scientific theories about why people believe in God. So you have to study Marx and Weber and Durkheim and all these people who said religion's a load of rubbish, basically. So the anthropologists, they sort of said, well, they would study cultures, and they go, oh, look at all these cultures, they all have different religious beliefs. And we see what's in common between all these groups is, for them, religious belief is a way of explaining the unexplainable. It's like, why are we here? How did we come into being? What happens when we die? These unexplainable things. What is the purpose of life? That is the purpose of religion. That's why people believe in God. It's because they need some way of making sense of this craziness. And you look at that and you go, ooh, that makes sense. It's very plausible. There's a part of me. I like these religious theories because they kind of make sense of the unexplainable. It might give me some reason, like maybe there's a heaven, maybe there's a hell, maybe there's, Adam and Eve. Maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. But there are these various sort of things, and you can see that's maybe a part of the reason why people believe in religion. Then you've got the sociologists. It's Weber, people like that. And they're like, oh, look, religion is this very convenient way. Like there's lots of people grouped together in societies, and these societies need to have some kind of control. And religion is this wonderful way of giving people a moral basis and fear, like they're afraid of going to hell or they want to go to heaven. So you're encouraging people to behave well. So religions are invented as social control. And you're like, ooh, makes sense. It's very plausible. Like we needed everybody to behave well, so we created this thing called religion. We said, oh, you better behave well, otherwise you're going to hell. Plausible. You've got psychologists like Freud. We're all just afraid of death. We're terrified of death. And so we have this thing called religion. So, oh, it's okay. Yeah, you think you're going to die, but actually it's all right. You're going to live forever. You're like, ooh, yeah, I have a bit of that. I'm afraid of death. Religion says you're not going to die. Oh, I like that. I can see it. It's plausible. There are all these reasons. And you say, you're forced bit by bit to go, what is it? Do I believe in these things? Is there something else to religion? Or is it just something that you can take apart like a scientist and dissect and say, and they're all plausible. They're all perfectly good explanations for why people believe in God. Then you've even got political scientists who sort of say, religion, it's this cool way in which you can stop the poor from rioting against the rich. Because you say, I know your lot in life is pretty shit, but it's going to be great when you die. So don't worry, don't panic. Don't be nasty and overthrow all the rich people. So the political scientists see it like different type of social control. You're like, that would be a good reason to create. Like very powerful people would create religion to stop everybody else from overthrowing them. So then you're left with like, maybe there's no such thing. Maybe this religion thing is all rubbish. So why meditate? Well, I'll offer you another hypothesis. Like, I think all of those other theories, there's probably some legitimacy to them. There is probably some people who do believe in religion for some of those reasons. But there's another possibility, which is simply that some people throughout history have had relatively extraordinary experiences. They've had some kind of an experience, like they would tend to call it a mystical experience, that changes the way they see the world. And they believe that this experience they've had is of real importance. It's like there's something very important and profound that they experienced. And then they try and explain it. And that's when we run into trouble, is that when they try and explain it, they explain it through the story and the culture and the history and the religion that they come out of. So if you come out of a theistic background, like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, you're going to explain that in terms of, you have this extraordinary experience, and you're going to explain that in terms of God. If you come out of a Buddhist experience or a Hindu background, you're going to explain that in terms of our place in the world and what that means about the nature of reality and the nature of being human. But in all of these cases, people throughout all of these traditions have had very similar mystical experiences in which they've said, there is something. There is something extraordinary to be experienced. And then they try and tell you how to do it. And there are lots of aspects about trying to have these experiences. Lots of aspects about how you live your life and about how you might get to this space. But a lot of what they're suggesting is that whatever it is, it's really cool. And that then religions get made around these things. But the problem is that these people have described something that even they admit they're not really getting it right. You can't really describe it accurately. They're just doing their best shot at it. It's ineffable. It's undescribable. And so they're trying to sort of roughly explain it, and then somebody else has tried to roughly explain it, and the descriptions don't match up quite. And then you get the theologians involved, and they all start arguing about what it means. And they're going, well, in the Greek, this word over here means such and such, so I think it means such and such. And so they all start arguing. And then we get lost in religion, and Protestants and Catholics and Hindus and Jains and Sikhs, and everybody starts fighting about who's right. When possibly everybody was talking about the same thing, just using different language to do it. And meditation in every single tradition is one of the pathways that people use to try and get you to that experience. Now, what that experience is, I can't describe it. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I would suggest that we can all touch into it. And if we touch into it and we have a tiny little inkling, even if it's for half a second, even if it's that half second where you're fully absorbed in the breathing, where the mind stops working so much, when you're not worrying about what's for dinner, how are you going to make enough money to pay rent or whatever. When we're not thinking and solving problems, hypothesizing about the future, worrying about the past or whatever, if we can turn that off and we can simply be in the present moment, that sometimes just being in the present moment is extraordinary. And when we get that tiny little inkling, there's that little buzz of excitement of like, ooh, I think I got it. And then, of course, the brain kicks in. You go, ooh, I think I experienced it. Oh, that was really cool. Damn, lost it again. But in meditation, we get to experience tiny little moments, tiny little insights. It's like what they call the veil is being pulled aside, even if it's just for a moment, and we see what's on the other side. And that's, I think, what people have, that's one possibility of what these religions have been hinting at. And meditation is the vehicle by which we find it. Maybe.